Deep inside a French cliffside, a cave had been sealed behind solid rock for more than 20,000 years. Not a single ray of light, breath of air, or living creature had entered since the Ice Age. Three friends out on a casual walk, not scientists by any stretch, noticed a peculiar draft sneaking through a crack far too narrow to squeeze into. What waited on the other side would shatter everything we believed we understood about our ancient ancestors. The crack in the cliff. The cave rests along a limestone cliff above what was once the riverbed of the Ardèche, tucked within a stretch of gorges in southeastern France. It is today regarded as one of the most significant prehistoric art sites anywhere on Earth, and UNESCO awarded it World Heritage status back in June 2014. The three cavers were ordinary people, not researchers. They were simply wandering the gorges as a pastime when they noticed a faint pull of air moving through solid rock, the sort of tiny detail most people would stroll right past without giving it a second glance. That subtle current of air led them toward a hole barely large enough for a human body to squeeze through. And beyond it lay a cave system that had not touched open air in tens of thousands of years. News spread almost instantly through the archaeology world once the paintings were confirmed to be genuine. Researchers who arrived in those first few weeks could tell right away that this discovery did not line up with anything they had ever encountered before. The site was eventually named after Jean-Marie Chauvet, despite the fact that two other people were standing right next to him when the entrance was found. What still left everyone puzzled at that early stage was a far greater question, one that would require years of patient work to begin answering. How had a cave of this scale remained completely untouched for so long without a single person or creature ever stumbling inside? What had sealed it off so thoroughly? The answer traced back to a single event, a massive rockfall that came crashing down and buried the cave's only entrance. Scientists studying the site eventually narrowed down roughly when that collapse occurred. Drawing on more than 250 radiocarbon samples collected from charcoal, bone fragments, and torch marks on the walls, researchers identified evidence of two distinct windows of time when humans visited the cave. One period ran from around 37,000 to 33,500 years ago, and a second from roughly 31,000 to 28,000 years ago. The team concluded that the first rockfall blocked part of the entrance near the close of that earlier window, while two additional collapses shut it entirely not long after the second group of visitors departed. After that final sealing, nothing bigger than an insect could have found a way inside. That single event transformed the cave into something resembling a time capsule. Rain never reached the paintings. Wind never eroded the pigment. No animal dragged mud across the floor or dislodged debris from the ceiling overhead. The temperature and humidity within stayed remarkably consistent across thousands of years, shielded from every shift in weather occurring just a short distance away on the surface above. That degree of stillness is nearly impossible to come across anywhere else on Earth, and it is precisely what allowed so much to survive in such astonishing condition inside all that darkness. As researchers began charting the interior, they discovered a cave system far more extensive than anyone had imagined from the outside. Chauvet is composed of 6 connected chambers stretching across roughly 1,300 feet of rock, and it contains more than 1,000 paintings alongside carvings cut directly into sections of the walls. The creatures depicted across those surfaces were not the familiar peaceful grazing animals found in most other ancient cave art around the world. Alongside horses, mammoths, and rhinoceroses, the walls of Chauvet are lined with predators, cave lions, cave bears, hyenas, and even a leopard, animals that almost never appear in this style of art from the same era anywhere else. The cave floor, once examined carefully by scientists, had its own remarkable story to tell. Soft clay ground still carried the paw prints of cave bears that had once slept there, along with broad, shallow hollows where those same animals curled up to rest through the night. Fossilized bones lay scattered across the floor. Researchers came across bear skulls and the curved horns of an ibex, a set of small footprints made by a child with what appeared to be a wolf or dog track running right beside them were pressed into the clay exactly where they had been left more than 25,000 years ago. Nothing had been disturbed across all that time. And working out just how extraordinary that level of preservation truly was would end up reshaping the way scientists understood early human art entirely. For decades before Chauvet was discovered, most specialists believed that cave art began rough and basic, then gradually improved over thousands of years as skills were handed down through generations. That thinking came from a well-known historian named André Louis-Gourhan, who laid out this theory of slow, steady progress in a major book on prehistoric art that came out in 1965. It seemed reasonable enough on paper, and almost no one in the field seriously challenged it for 30 straight years. Chauvet tore that theory apart the moment researchers began examining the walls in detail. The paintings found inside were not clumsy outlines or hasty scratches. Artists had scraped the rock surface clean before applying pigment, creating a smooth, pale background that made their colors pop with greater contrast. They used the natural ridges and curves of the stone to give the animals a sense of volume and muscle. In certain panels, a creature had been drawn with additional legs or a second head placed just slightly off-center, so that when seen under the flickering glow of a torch, the figure appeared to shift and move, almost like an early version of animation. None of this matched the old picture of primitive, stumbling beginnings. It looked instead like the work of artists who already carried generations of refined skill long before anyone imagined that kind of ability was possible. Working out the actual age of these paintings became the next major challenge researchers had to tackle, and the method they used to answer that question would ultimately settle the entire debate once and for all. Researchers turned to radiocarbon dating to establish precise figures, testing charcoal samples taken directly from the black drawings on the walls, along with torch smears and bones found scattered across the cave floor. By the early 2010s, more than 80 separate radiocarbon dates had been gathered from the site. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2012 confirmed that the paintings were created during the Aurignacian period, somewhere between 30,000 and 32,000 years ago, based in part on rockslide analysis near what researchers believe was the cave's only entrance. Later research expanded the picture still further. Some of the oldest black drawings at Chauvet have now been dated to around 36,000 years ago, placing them among the earliest confirmed examples of figurative art ever found anywhere on the planet. That figure put Chauvet thousands of years ahead of Lascaux, the cave in central France that had long been considered the benchmark of ancient art before Chauvet entered the picture. All at once, the timeline scientists had relied on for decades required a complete revision, and that raised a question stretching far beyond a single cave in France. If people living 36,000 years ago were already capable of shading, layering pigment, and producing the illusion of movement on a cave wall, then the entire notion of early humans fumbling awkwardly toward basic ability demanded serious reconsideration. These were individuals surviving the last ice age, hunting dangerous animals to stay alive, and yet still possessing both the time and the mental capacity to produce art this sophisticated. Some researchers today think the cave was never actually used as a dwelling at all. There are no signs of long-term habitation, no scattered layers of everyday refuse, no worn-down living areas near a fire pit that saw years of regular use. Instead, many scientists suspect Chauvet served some kind of ceremonial or spiritual function, a place people came specifically to make these images rather than somewhere they slept or ate their daily meals. One particular detail makes that idea feel even more intimate. A series of handprints appear spread across different chambers throughout the cave. Some were painted as solid filled shapes, while others were left as outlines where pigment was blown around a hand pressed flat against the rock surface. Researchers noticed that one individual, recognizable by a slightly curved pinky finger, left prints in several different locations across the cave. That means it is possible to follow a single human being's journey through complete darkness more than 30,000 years after they walked it, using nothing except the marks their own hand left on the stone. Even with that remarkable finding, plenty of fundamental questions about who these artists truly were remain entirely without answers. The search for other caves like it. Once Chauvet demonstrated that sophisticated art existed this far back, researchers began asking whether it was genuinely unique or simply the first example anyone had stumbled upon. Beginning in 2008, members of the team studying Chauvet broadened their efforts to other rock art locations scattered along the Ardèche River Gorge, working under the direction of researcher Julian Mani. One of those locations, known as Point's Cave, displayed drawing styles that looked remarkably similar to those found inside Chauvet, suggesting that the same group of people, or at minimum, a closely linked culture, may have decorated more than one cave across the region. Another nearby location, called Du Oever's Cave, was examined for precisely the same reasons. This broader investigation eventually became known as the Ditian Gratus Ornis project, and its goal is to understand the full pattern of Ice Age art across that stretch of France, rather than treating Chauvet as an isolated event standing entirely on its own. The work moves slowly, since every newly examined cave requires its own careful dating and mapping before any meaningful comparisons can be made. So far, the project has delivered results that help place Chauvet within a larger regional picture, revealing that Ice Age communities living along the Ardèche were likely connected to one another in ways researchers had not previously considered. Even with these additional sites offering extra context, nothing discovered nearby has come close to matching the scale or preservation of what lies inside Chauvet itself. And protecting that preservation became its own enormous challenge once the wider world learned the cave existed. Protecting what the rockfall saved, news of the discovery traveled quickly, and researchers immediately thought back to what had unfolded at Lascaux decades before. That cave, found in 1940, had been open to visitors for years before scientists understood that people were gradually destroying it. Body heat, breath, and lighting from thousands of tourists caused mold and a type of green algae to spread across the ancient paintings, damaging artwork that had endured for tens of thousands of years before anyone ever stepped through its entrance. Lascaux was ultimately shut permanently once the extent of the damage became undeniable. Determined not to repeat that same error, French authorities closed Chauvet off from public access almost immediately following its discovery, and it has stayed closed ever since. Only a small handful of researchers are permitted inside each year, operating under tight restrictions on both time and equipment to avoid altering the cave's temperature or humidity even in the slightest way. To offer the public a means of experiencing the site without putting the original at risk, a full-sized replica called the Espace d'Estate La Gratte Chauvet was constructed nearby, faithfully recreating the chambers and paintings in precise and careful detail. The actual cave stays sealed exactly as the rockfall left it, while millions of visitors walk through its carefully constructed replica instead. What researchers have yet to determine is who precisely created the artwork inside Chauvet and what particular beliefs pushed them to produce these images so deep underground, completely cut off from natural light. Tucked away in the furthest chamber is one especially puzzling figure, a form blending the lower half of a woman's body with the head and forelegs of a bison, hanging from a section of rock that protrudes downward from the ceiling like a natural pendant. Scholars still debate what that figure was intended to communicate. Whether it reflects an early spiritual system, a tale shared within a group, or something else altogether that contemporary minds may never fully untangle. Then there is the question of the two distinct groups who occupied the cave thousands of years apart. Researchers know an earlier group produced the first black drawings, and a second group showed up roughly 5,000 years later, adding their own artwork before the final rockfalls sealed the entrance permanently. Whether that second group had any awareness of those who came before them or simply discovered the same cave on their own remains an unanswered question. Researchers keep conducting new tests using advanced dating techniques and three-dimensional scanning technology, hoping each fresh pass through the data moves them a little closer to genuine answers. What all of this amounts to? None of this is built on speculation or a narrative pushed beyond what the evidence actually supports. Every detail connects back to peer-reviewed radiocarbon studies, geological assessments of the collapsed entrance, and decades of thorough fieldwork conducted by genuine research teams operating across several French institutions. The cave stays closed to the public today, shielded from the kind of mold and deterioration that damaged portions of Lascaux once tourists began passing through it. People can only experience a full-scale reproduction built close by, while the original chambers remain sealed exactly as they were found. What started as three friends following a faint current of air through a crack in a hillside became one of the most significant archaeological finds of the past century. Evidence that human creativity was already extraordinarily sophisticated tens of thousands of years before anyone thought it could be. A rockfall that might have destroyed everything instead preserved it perfectly, locking one small fragment of the Ice Age in place until 1994 came along and broke it open again. Scientists are still uncovering new details buried within that darkness, and there is a very real possibility that the next thing pulled from those walls changes the entire story once more. If you got something out of this breakdown, go ahead and subscribe, and I will catch you in the music next one.